continue with our education of meat cutting and butchering here at the University of Kentucky. Today I thought we would show you how to break down a lamb carcass, not only break it down into its wholesale cuts, but also into some of the retail and more popular retail cuts that we have with lamb. And this particular lamb came in, this carcass weighs roughly around 67 pounds. We know through research and experience about 50% of that live weight is going to go into the cooler in the form of a carcass. We call that a dressing percentage, the difference between the live weight and the carcass weight. Obviously, there's a lot of things that can affect this. Sheep are unique in that they produce wool, obviously, and that's a very prized commodity for clothing and other items that come off the wool. But the last time this animal was shorn will ultimately play a role in that dressing percentage. So if it came in basically looking like a cotton ball with legs, obviously that wool adds a lot of weight that doesn't go into the cooler in the form of a carcass. When you get into the fall and the spring of the year, when the ground is soft and wet, there's going to be mud that's going to get caked on the hide of the animal. When you weigh that live animal, that mud goes into that, and obviously we don't go into that, doesn't go into the carcass. And so there's a lot of factors. When the last time the animal drank or ate will affect that as well. When the last time the animal was weighed. We've noticed that sheep can sometimes lose 5, 10, maybe 15 pounds if they're left off feed for a 24-hour period. So not only does this particular sheep that weighs 67 pounds, we know his live weight was around 130, 140 pounds if we kind of back calculate the 50% range. But we can also tell a lot about this carcass by looking at the fat. Notice how this particular animal has a white colored fat. That is very indicative of an animal that's had access to grain, whether that be corn or whatever type of high concentrate grain in its diet. If this fat was more yellow, that's indicative of a grass-fed or grass-finished animal. And this translates into beef as well. It doesn't translate into pork very much, but into beef it translates into what it's been eating, and in lamb as well, because they're both ruminants. And so you can see this particular animal here it was a lamb off of one of our farms at the University of Kentucky. It's had a little bit of grain, you can see by the white colored fat. One of the first things we do when we start to fabricate this particular carcass is remove the neck. And what I like to do is remove the neck at right where the neck meets the shoulder. And you can see this particular animal has the neck kind of moving more towards a perpendicular to the flow of the backbone, but I like to remove it at the natural flow of the shoulder. And so you can see right here where that juncture is. Kind of rock him up a little bit so we have a straight cut. And again, we don't normally think of this, but this neck has possibilities from retail cut standpoint as well. What we'll typically do is go ahead and cut this into maybe 1-inch chunks or 1-inch steaks, and a consumer will utilize this neck for soup stock, something along those lines. So it does have value. What's kind of interesting here, kind of an anatomy lesson, see this joint right here? This is called the atlas joint. All animals, including human beings, have atlas joints. It's the joint that allows your head to move back and forth. And when during the harvesting process, when we remove the head, this is the joint we look for. And it's really simple. You just come in here, hit that bone, kind of go up around in a W and come back, and that frees the head from the neck. And so it's kind of a neat little thing to see there is that atlas joint. It shows up really well in lamb carcasses because lambs are usually left whole, whereas pork and beef carcasses are halved. Now we're going to remove the front trotter and the breast from the rest of the carcass. There's a lot of different methods to doing this. The way I like to teach it is you can see how this front trotter comes in and creates this elbow pocket. I like to go right in there, and that's where I'm going to remove this. Flip it over and do the other side the exact same way. Now what a common mistake I see individuals make is, you see I flipped it over and it kind of sits at a bit of an angle there, and folks will come in here and they'll cut straight down. And they're really messing angles up. So when you bring him over, make sure you kind of rock it over to where it's setting more level. Again, right at that elbow pocket, cutting through those ribs. Set him off to the side. Now, a little bit of a teaching opportunity with this particular carcass. When we're harvesting these animals and we've already washed them off and we've weighed them and they're ready to go in the cooler and begin chilling down for the next 24 hours, we will often display these front trotters up. And there's a tendon in there that we cut into to expose that tendon so we can display them up. As you can see here in our other example, there's that tendon there. And part of it is when these particular animals are graded, much like beef carcasses. Whereas beef carcasses, we're going to look at forensic indicators of the chine buttons in the backbone. We can't see them because this carcass is left whole. And so we use these guys right here. These are what you're seeing are the epiphyseal plates. I'll expand that down so you can see that a little bit better. The epiphyseal plate of the bone. Bones grow from the ends, not from the middle. And on a younger animal, what the guys do on the harvest floor is they'll feel for nodges right there when they're taking the hide off, and they will score it, and they'll grab it and pop it. And when they break it off, if we break it at this epiphyseal plate where you can see these 8 little protrusions there, we call that a break joint. If the animal is done growing that bone and is older, when they score that and break it off, you'll see what's called a spool joint. Looks like a thread spool there. That's an indication of an older animal. Here on this particular carcass, you can see we have 2 break joints. So this is a fairly young animal, meaning this animal is roughly probably around 10 months to a year old. So he's a young animal. The reason why we're concerned about the age of the animal, older animals tend to be tougher than younger animals. That goes for beef, pork, and lamb. The other issue we have with lamb, if we have 2 spool joints here, we would classify that as mutton. Mutton has a stronger flavor than lamb. There are individuals that like lamb but do not like mutton. And so we always pay attention to that for the grading purposes as well as a flavor indicator, because we know that this animal is going to be more mild than the older mutton. So once we get to this point, sometimes you can do this with your knife, a little bit of muscle, is remove that bone. And so I like to get over here at the edge. Since we're on camera, it's not going to work that well. Split that. Because basically this is just solid bone. There's a little bit of fat right there, but that's about it. So there's nothing to eat on it. Here we have some meat. And even though we don't think of the shanks off a beef carcass being all that edible, other than we use it for ground beef, or the hocks off the pig that we would smoke and cure for seasonings, this is, you'll see in a lot of times in restaurants, cooked correctly, this is a really good piece of meat. Lamb shanks is what you see there. You can see as comparison, here's one with the front trotter left on, and here's one with it taken off. We've removed the front trotters, and one of the reasons why we like to remove the neck is it's easier to bring this guy up. And so it sets a little bit more flat and level. Again, ruminants, beef and lamb, they have 13 pairs of ribs. And so we use ribs as a cutting marker. And so what we like to do is when we remove this shoulder, we like to go between the 4th and 5th rib. And so this allows us, by cutting this off first, it allows us to see inside the rib cage so we can start counting ribs. And so we'll get our knife here so we can see it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Make a mark there. Always good carpenter measures twice and cuts once, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're good there. I don't always think that if I make this cut straight across that I'm going to hit that between the 4th and 5th rib, so I always like to count the other side as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mark that guy. Count again. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Get our bigger knife out. And so what I like to do is a lot of cutting with my knife before my saw, just to kind of mark things out, makes things a little bit easier to cut through. Okay. What I'm hitting there is the shoulder blade. Kind of same there. So now freed it a little bit. You see, we've got our shoulder. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw. You can actually do this with a handsaw, but for our purpose, it's going to be quicker. I'm going to split this in half. This is our bandsaw, and this is a really important piece of equipment in all meat processing facilities. It's an extremely dangerous piece of equipment. We run into a lot of times where people are wearing steel mesh gloves, which we have one here we'll show you. This is a steel mesh glove, and it's a cut resistant glove, meaning that I can hit this with my knife and not cut myself. If you're wearing one of these gloves and working with these blades, these bandsaws, you got to take this off. The reason being is if we're working, you actually get your finger caught in there. Okay, you can see how it's pulling. All right, this particular blade is off, and I got this glove on. If this was going, this thing spins at roughly around 3,000 to 3,500 RPMs, and so that's going to cause some serious damage. So if you're working with this particular bandsaw and you got a cut-proof glove on, make sure you take it off. All right, at least if you got bare fingers in there, you can pull them back. This attaches to your wrist, as you can see. Attaches to your wrist, snaps in there. It's hard to get out, especially when you're panicked when you feel that glove catch that blade. So never ever use this particular item with a steel mesh glove. Again, what we're going to do is go straight down the backbone. Hopefully we can go straight down the middle here. Take your time. See, we've split the shoulder in half. We're going to come in here and remove some fat. What you're seeing there is a lymph gland. If this was in beef, we would refer to this as a sweetbread. In lamb, it's just a lymph gland. We're going to take that out because not a lot of folks want lymph gland in their chops. We'll clean that up a little bit. And what we're going to do with this, we can leave it whole like this. So we're going to leave this particular cut whole, and we're going to set it over on a block. Or we can start making chops. Typically what we like to do is start here at the arm end. This is the arm end. You got a nice round bone there. So we're going to take about 2 or 3 chops off of here, and then you'll see me spin it over and start removing blade chops. You always know it's a blade because there's the shoulder blade. What is really neat about these animals, any animal that walks on 4 legs, whether it's sheep, pigs, cattle, goats, whatever, this whole front leg from here at the arms cut surface down to the shoulder blade is not attached to the rest of the skeleton. So that tells you a lot about the muscular system that's in here holding this animal up. Most of the weight of that animal is going to be on the front of the animal. So these particular cuts are going to have bigger muscle fibers. They're going to have a more dense connective tissue matrix. So they're going to be a little bit tougher. We have to cook these a little bit different than we do muscles of support, which usually run along the backbone. They have smaller muscle fibers, they have less dense connective tissue matrix, and they tend to be a little bit more tender as well. We can throw those cuts on the grill. These particular cuts don't work good on the grill. So we're going to cut about 1 inch thick. You can see the various cuts we've got off the shoulder. We've got our arm chops and our blade chops. And whenever you use a bone-in saw, like we used over here on our bandsaw, you can see it leaves like a sawmill or a sawdust on the surface. It's extremely important. We have a meat scraper here. It's extremely important that you remove that, especially if you're going to use these for retail display. And the reason why we like to remove that for retail display, number one, it looks better, and number two, by removing that, it makes our shelf life longer. Okay? Because what happens is that sawmill that's on there, it doesn't allow the oxygen to reach the surface of the meat, and so we don't get that nice meat bloom, that nice red color, and it decreases our shelf life. Okay? So you can see, a lot of folks ask, well, how do you know where to stop cutting? Okay? You can see on these arm chops, we still have a nice round bone, and that's what I want to see, is a nice round bone on these particular cuts. Okay? That looks pleasing to the consumer. On these blade cuts, you can see how, get this cleaned up a little bit so you can see it. You can see we got our shoulder blade, but after a while, after about 4 cuts or 5 cuts on this one, you can see how that blade bone changes. You flip it over, it looks normal. Flip it over, it looks normal, but on the other side, you see that blade bone changes. You can display it like that, yes, and it hides that. But from a consumer standpoint, they're going to buy that, especially lamb, which lamb's a special item now. Lamb is typically purchased more towards Easter in the spring, maybe around Christmas time as well. Passover for our friends of the Jewish faith. They take that home and they see that, but you've sold it, yes. But chances are they're going to remember that, and your repeat sales on this is going to be extremely limited. So I always like to stop right there where things start to change in appearance, so I make sure that we're selling our customers a nice looking product. This is another piece right here. I don't know if you can see that. This tendon through here, this is the tendon that holds the head up. His Latin name is a ligamenta nuchae. No, it sounds a little odd, but this, no matter how hard we cook it or how much we cook it or how much moisture, it's not going to soften up. It's going to stay pretty tough. So we need to take that off of there. Okay. And trim these particular cuts up as well. And so you see, I'll trim one of these up. And keep these on display. Okay. Lamb is often served with mint. It works well with these particular cuts. Mint jelly is a very popular side item to serve with lamb. And there are some folks that will tell you need to cut more fat off it. Others want more fat left on it. The fat on lambs has a different flavor than beef fat, obviously. But, you know, you work with your customers to see how much fat they want left on there. So we got blade chop and we got arm chop. All right, we've removed the shoulder, and we've talked about some of the retail cuts we can get from the shoulder. Next, we're going to remove the rack. In beef, we refer to this as the rib, but in lambs, we call it the rack. When we remove this rack from the rest of the carcass, the rack needs to contain at least 8 ribs. And so we need to get inside here and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're going to mark this. Right there is our 8th rib. Okay. We'll do the other side as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what I like to do, you see me using a lot of my knife to cut here. So once we get down to where the loin is, you'll see me come straight across with my knife to cut the muscle of the loin. So what I'm going to do is come straight across down, follow. There's that muscle. Connect the 2 dots right there. Get the two loins, okay? Reason I do that is, number one, when this saw goes through there, it generates heat, and that heat can affect the shelf life, and these particular cuts don't have an extremely long shelf life to begin with, and so I like to use as much as my knife as possible. And what I'll even do is kind of bring this over to the edge so I can get a clean cut with my saw. Go. Okay. We actually accidentally came on the other side of the rib there, so that's a little boogered up a bit, but you can see you have a full rack. What we're going to do with this is split it in half and cut the ribs off. We're going to do two things with it. I'm going to show you something kind of neat with it as well. Basically, we take our saw, go right down the backbone. You can see a little bit of work on the bandsaw. We came in here and we cut what we call the chine button, or chine bone off, and that's where that vertebrae kind of wraps around. You can see it leaves that little lip down the middle of the backbone like that. I've cut that off, and I've cut these relief cuts in here. You can just come in here and you can cut, rib chops or tomahawk chops out of this, whatever you want to do. I'll show you how to do the tomahawk chops here in a second. But I thought I'd show you something really neat, especially around Easter time. You'll see a lot of these in grocery stores. They take a while to make, and we'll kind of show you the theme of how they work here. The reason why I cut those relief cuts in there is I want to be able to spin this guy around, okay? Just like so, and it helps with the spinning. It's like that, something kind of new and unique. And what I will do is come in here, make a cut like that straight across the back. My knife down in here. And remove the fat and the lean tissue through there. Make sure we get that nice and cleaned up. And then cut the meat away from the middle of the ribs. I said if you got plenty of time and you got family coming over for Easter, this is a fun one to do. You can do the same thing with pork, although you don't see it done with pork as much as you do with lamb. It takes a little bit of time to do it. It's kind of fun to do if you get a feel for it. Okay. You see I've displayed that. We're going to do the same to the other side. Do that so you can get a kind of a gist of exactly what things look like. Again, coming in here, removing the meat from the bone. Get that off there so you can see what I'm doing. Just running my knife along the sides there. Pulling, making sure my fingers are out of the way of the knife. Always think safety first. Again, like we did with the other side, cut the lean from in between the ribs. Move those bones up a little bit more. And so when I was a retail meat cutter, about every Easter we would make 2 or 3 of these and we would sell them. Lamb is a difficult thing to find throughout the rest of the year in some grocery stores. It's not a high seller in some areas, so not a lot of folks will stock it on a consistent basis. But around the holidays, Easter and Christmas, you will see a lot of that in the store. So you can see what I'm doing here. Basically, what we would do, you kind of have to use your imagination a little bit. Tie those 2 sides together, and you have, call a crown rack or a crown rack of ribs. Lamb ribs. And so we don't time. That's why we put those relief cuts in there so you could do that with them. You spin it around so you can have that nice rounded appearance, and you can sew those together and get a meat needle and sew them together. Usually with a larder needle works well. Or if you want to have a little bit more fun, okay, we're going to come in here, cut straight down, in between the rib here. Step over here and buzz this little nip off of there. These cuts are even becoming popular in pork and beef as well, as leaving a long rib on there, like so. Cleaning that rib up, taking away some of the fat. Trim them up, make them look a little nicer. And I've seen these called several different things. Either cowboy cuts, if they leave the nice long rib in there, you see them cowboy cuts if it's beef, or a tomahawk cut, because it looks like a tomahawk. With lamb, I've even seen this referred to as a lamb lollipop. Okay? And it's just something kind of neat if you got guests coming over. Nice long bone there for appearance sake. Remember, we eat a lot with our eyes as well as our mouth, and so a nice cooking this to medium rare degree of doneness, nice glaze and some garnish and a few of these on a plate. It's going to look really neat. Okay, we have the loin saddle and the leg. We need to remove the loin saddle from the leg. You can see as we come down here, these are the globes to the sirloin. I like to call them the globes. They come down and they meet in this sirloin juncture. And usually you go a little bit, about a ½ inch, an inch or so beyond where the point comes down. And we make our cut. You can hear how the saw changes. That means we're through the bone. Finish taking the loin off. We're going to set the leg off to the side here. Face this up a little bit. We have our lamb loin. What we'll do is come in here and take these wings off, if you will. There should be one rib left in here, so we're going to have to use our handsaw to go through that. Okay. Lamb loin. Trim some of this kidney fat. Some of that out of there. There's the loin. Now you can split this in half and make lamb loin chops. One of the things that we've had a little bit of success with here at the UK Butcher Shop is making kind of an older cut called a lamb loin double chop. And I'll show you. I'll just buzz this on the saw real quick. Common complaint people say about lamb is you don't get very much for the money, because lamb's a smaller animal, so there's not as much meat on that animal. And that's what's kind of neat about American lamb, is American lamb tends to be a lot heavier muscled and a lot more meat on the bone than Australian or New Zealand lamb. I'm not bashing either of those two products, just pointing out the difference between those. You can see we've kind of created a double chop. Basically, instead of splitting that particular cut in half, we now have I wouldn't say a new cut, it's been around for a long time, but it's kind of fell out of favor. The lamb double chop. And so for those individuals that want a little bit more lamb on their plate, there you go. Now, again, we talked about this earlier, is when we scrape it and we scrape that sawmill off of there, you can see on there, on our scraper here, how that sawmill has gathered. That's good. That's what we want this particular item to do. But I want to show you something. I want to caution you on what a common practice that I've seen not only in retail and grocery store butcher shops, but as well as what I've seen in meat processing facilities as well, is that gets clambered up there and then they go over here to this guy. This is a bone barrel. This is where all the scraps go. And even though we clean these, they're still kind of dirty on the inside. And so what I see a lot of people do is slap this on the side. All right? The issue with slapping this on the side to remove this is contaminated. So now we've got all the bacteria on this, and then we go back over here and scrape it, and we've inoculated this nasty bacteria on there. And so what I encourage people to do, if you're going to use that bone barrel, just kind of slap it on the edge of your hand or something along those lines. I will be the first to admit it's really easy, and it's, just to slap it on there and get it off. But if we're looking to extend our shelf life by avoiding that, we don't run into those problems. So now we got, like I said earlier, we have our lamb double chop and our lamb loin. You can do whatever you like with those. We're left with our leg, and obviously we got both the legs here to deal with. I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can break this with your handsaw. We've been using the bandsaw a lot, mainly because we've got access to it. It's a lot quicker and it's a lot easier. But if you're doing this at home, or if you have a butcher shop that does not have a bandsaw, when you're breaking lamb, the handsaw works just as well. There's kind of a neat little teaching moment right here. You can tell whether or not a carcass was a male or a female if you know exactly where to look. And this area right here is sometimes referred to the area where the sex fat is located. And you can see how rough and globular this fat is. This fat is, rough and globular like this is referred to as cod fat. Only male animals have a cod. This is where the testicles were at one time. If this was smooth, we would refer to it as udder fat. Females have udders. And so you can see by looking at the shape of the fat, you can tell whether it was a male or female. Obviously, this is rough and globular. This came from a male animal. Okay? Just kind of a little fun fact in case you're wondering how we actually do tell whether an animal is male or female. Okay? And so in order to split this, I want to make sure I get a nice clean cut. So I'm going to make sure that we can see the bones. I'm going to line it up here so that we're right across the middle. See, we got a little bit off on here, okay? Not ideal. We can actually cut that off and level it out. It's not ideal. It's kind of tough to do this with your handsaw. But again, if you're working with a handsaw, you paid for the entire length of this blade, use it, and let the saw do the work. A little bit of pressure is all it really needs. to cut through there. So we have our legs. You can even come in here and cut the flanks off if you want to. Okay, and whole legs are kind of common during holiday seasons, and so we're going to get rid of this piece right here, this bone. So I'm just going to come in here. You can see where this is called the gambrel. I'm going to cut that guy off right there. And what that allows, hopefully we can see this at home. You see right here, as this shank comes down, you can see through the fascia. Let's get that lined up there so you can see it. You can see through the fascia there, there's a nice little line there. Okay? That's what you're shooting for. And you can actually take this, kind of score that line a little bit there with your knife, move it over the edge of your butcher block, and one good swipe and push down, and you broke that bone in half, just like that. And that's a good, easy way, without getting your saw back out, of removing that particular cut. So here we have a whole leg, all right? We can do the same with the other side as well. I'll show you something kind of unique we can do with the other side. Okay, once again, cutting that gambrel, cutting back to that line, scoring it, back. Okay. Well, maybe we'll cut through it. There we go. I'm going to leave this one like this, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with it here in a second. This point right here is the sirloin area. And so I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw. I'm going to cut some sirloin chops off of it. Again, we're going to get a block scraper out. Scrape the sawmill off of both sides. Okay. We don't want our customers taking that home and flipping it over and seeing all that sawmill on the other side. Okay. See, you see kind of three different versions of the sirloin. Oop. Okay. Okay. This one almost looks like a loin chop, like we talked about earlier, but it does have a bone down there. If this was beef, we would refer to this as a pin bone sirloin. We don't normally think of beef sirloins being bone-in, but we do see a lot of bone-in sirloins in lambs. And again, we're going to clean these up and make them look nice. Okay, just like so. There's one. Again, I'm going to take this vertebrae off of here, and you can see, common thing is want to go straight down, but there's a bone there. If you flip it over, look at that. I'm just going to go right in between those with my knife. I have to wiggle it around a little bit. Maybe get through there. Like so. Again, it can be displayed like this. A little bit more fat off of there. Make them look nice. And like this. And again, you can see that bone. We're going to right down the middle. This side's a little bit easier. Trim him up. So you can see the various shapes and sizes of the lamb sirloin chops. Okay, somewhat of a popular item. And then we're left with this. We're going to come in here once again. Get rid of that sawmill off of there. And what a lot of people like to do with this is, well, we're just going to do this. We're going to take this, cut all the way around. We're going to remove the meat, the shank muscle. So like we talked with our rib chop, we have sometimes referred to as a tomahawk chop or a French chop. We now have a French style leg. And reason why this is popular, especially if restaurants, it's really popular to do it this way. Nice, clean that bone up, is can put it in a buffet, and it kind of looks neat because you got this bone hanging there. But you also have, if you're the server, you have something to grab a hold of as you cut through it. Or we can leave it whole, like this particular leg here. We've fabricated our whole entire lamb carcass. You see we've gone down into some more of the wholesale cuts, like our legs and our shoulder, but we've also gone down into some retail cuts. For example, our double loin chop, our French cut chop, or lollipop chop, or tomahawk, whatever nomenclature we use for that. We can also take it down to a crown rack of lamb roast, sirloin chops, arm chops, and blade chops, a whole shoulder. But you know, as you can see, not a whole lot of effort went into breaking this carcass down. We've done this in just a few minutes, and we use both the bandsaw and the handsaw. If you don't have the bandsaw available to you, the handsaw works just as well. But you know, we've kind of scratched the surface of the amount of cuts that we can get from this, but we just kind of showed you some of the fun ones that we like to utilize here at UK and at the University of Kentucky Butcher Shop. So hope you enjoyed the fabrication of the lamb carcass, and please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Hope you learned something. Thank you.